Buckle up! Crane and the Cowboy with you here on the LibertyPlaybook.com, talking about some of the news of the week. And I guess politically the big news was the New York primary. No real surprise, Patrick. Donald Trump, 60% of the vote. Hillary Clinton pretty much doubled down on Bernie Sanders, as expected. But one funny thing, it's a big piece of real estate, Manhattan Island, about 8 million people, but Donald Trump didn't carry his home borough.
Yeah, John Kasich did, I think. And Kasich the next morning goes on TV and he says, well, you know, I carried Manhattan, you know, and that's pretty significant.
Pretty good.
Yeah, they're all Democrats.
Yeah. What does that tell you?
Yeah, really.
He's kind of moderate.
Yeah.
So, and as the week has ensued, Donald Trump is now spreading what may be a disinformation campaign. The word is from the Washington Post, we had this secret memo from the Trump camp saying, don't worry, we got the delegates. We're going to go into Cleveland on July 18th with about 2,400.
Yeah, well, that tells you the influence of Paul Manafort. That memo was what we used to do in the business when you want to create there's always lower expectations or create expectations or, you know, oh, if you lower them, then, oh boy, when you go above it, oh, look how well they did.
Just a flesh wound.
Exactly. So that was perfect because you now set a marker. And for how many hours in the day did the political narrative talk about? Where do they get this 1,400 delegates? Have you read this memo? Every talk radio is talking about it, everything else. And now all the people, the delegate hunters are going back, well, how does he get to 1,400? You've now set a mark, and that was a very mature thing to do as a campaign, which shows you that the guys that were running the campaign before are being pushed aside and the pros are coming in.
So when you see what looked to be political tricks, a little chicanery, that means the campaign's right on track.
Oh yeah, I mean, the fact that they're spreading, you know, it's like an army, you know. You're spreading false information everywhere to the enemy. Right. So which one is he doing? Is he attacking at the Pas-de-Calais or Normandy? I don't know.
Right.
So
this has been a really kind of ugly campaign. I mean, it's, you know, you had the allegations of, you know, one guy's running around with his wife and this and that, and stories planted in the Inquirer, Little Marco, Lion Ted. When this is all over, can everybody kiss and make up?
Yeah, they can. Will they? That's a different story. There are certain people, because unlike 76, everybody's using 76 as the benchmark of the last contested Republican convention, you know, there was bad blood, but they were the old world guys, you know. They didn't carry the grudges. There weren't all these other side issues out there. There wasn't talk radio. There wasn't Fox. There wasn't all these other things. So these guys said, okay, we're pros. We come together. I mean, look at James Baker worked for Ford to beat Reagan. And in 80, who's helping run a Reagan campaign, and who became chief of staff and then eventually Treasury Secretary. So
and eulogized Nancy Reagan.
So I mean, you bury the hatchet pretty quick. In the old days, this one, I hear these never Trump people, there was never a never Reagan movement. This is people that say, I won't even go to the convention if that guy's the nominee. I won't lift a finger to help him. This is not 76, this is 64, when the Goldwater beat the party establishment and they basically said, we're not gonna help you. We'll go do something else. And even though he was probably gonna lose anyways, he lost even worse. So I think that this is more similar to that year than it is to 1976.
Well, as the primaries move forward and they'll go into June, California is not the last primary, but it's probably the most significant in June. We've got 172 delegates up for grabs. A couple of wild cards. Wild card number one, if Trump somehow does get the nomination, will the party regulars, the elite, will they get behind him, or are they just going to pay lip service to it? Because if you're a Republican, do you want Obama 3.0? Do you want 2 Supreme Court vacancies filled by a Democrat? That's number one. Number two, of course, is the whole Hillary scenario, how that's going to play out.
Yeah, and that's the great unknown. And you and I were talking on the radio the other day. Uncertainty in politics is the worst thing you can have. To get up in the morning and know there's something that's beyond your control. It's one thing to say, well, there's an event that's going to happen, it could hurt us, but we're prepared for it. You know, we've gotten our story straight. You don't know in this situation. And so they're thinking, what if she's indicted? What if it's a criminal referral and she's not indicted? What if it's worse than what we think it is, not just emails? All this other stuff comes into play. So she's on pins and needles right now. On the other side, Donald Trump, if he comes to California, I think he's going to find it a little different than he thinks. I just saw Hugh Hewitt made a comment. He said, unless a meteor hits California, Trump won't get to 1237. And he means that Trump is going to have to sweep a lot of those delegates. Because as we mentioned, when you and I went through the other day, we did our little exercise. You know how close we were? We were darn close, because I watched a guy do it on television. I was saying,
and we gave him all of California.
And we gave him all of California. So we were pretty close on our estimation. But again, I mean, it's all boiling down. We're finally going to end this primary season, but right now, looks like Trump's got it, unless something happens.
It's interesting, and I guess this is true of any election, but it just seems maybe because this one has been so interesting, more people are paying attention. And doing this radio show this week, I would get the Cruz people, and Donald Trump is Lucifer,
right,
and vice versa. The Trump people, there is no middle ground, and I wonder if Trump does get in with 1237 cleanly. Okay, Ted Cruz, Kasich, maybe they gave it a good shot, and I wish him the best. But if it is close, and if somehow it's a second or third ballot and Trump loses it, it's going to be pretty ugly.
Yeah, and partially because Trump is spreading misinformation, I'll put it that way. He doesn't like the delegate process. He doesn't like, they didn't vote in Colorado.
He didn't like it because he didn't understand. He still doesn't understand.
Right. And I was just reading a story where how Trump called Roger Stone after one of the primaries where he lost. Can they do this to me? Can they take it away? And Stone told him, yeah, they can do it.
I mean, this is like, to put it in Donald Trump's livelihood terms. Wait a sec, I just bought this building.
Yeah.
I got to pay taxes on it?
Yeah.
You mean there's an easement over here?
Right.
Are you what? There's asbestos? I got to pay for that now? I mean, you got to do your homework.
Yep, he didn't do it. He didn't do what you would do in a real estate deal. Where's the due diligence?
Right.
Before you start laying down money. And in some respects, again, he had people around him. They were too junior. They didn't know how to stand up to him. And also, I don't think they knew. I mean, they might have known delegate rules. They might have known the generalities of it. But they should have come up to him and rolled out a plan. Here are the 50 states. Here's how each state works. So that he knew from the get-go, well, you mean if I win this state popular vote, doesn't it mean I get all these? No, you don't get all those. Here's how it works. Then he would have been informed, but again, that would have meant, if you told him that in the beginning, they would have said to him also, well, that means you got to put this much money into Iowa, this much money in New Hampshire, here's how it's going to cost you, here's how many people you're going to need, and we've already got a list of people to hire. He didn't do that. He's giving rallies, and he thinks, hey, the adulation, look, they're voting for me, millions and millions of people. Yeah, okay, that's nice, but you won the beauty contest, you won the swimsuit competition. You didn't win the question competition.
Well, if Trump does go down in flames, or even if he loses by this much of a margin, in one sense he can only blame himself, because his much vaunted, I'm not taking money from anybody, I'm self-funding, he's cheap. And that's, I mean, it takes money to buy, it takes money to make money, it takes money to win elections.
Yeah.
And what Ted Cruz is doing, and it's all, as Patrick will tell you, it's all on the up and up, he's not buying delegates, but he's looking into delegates he can influence.
He is so cheap, he squeaks like a brand new saddle that's never been oiled. This guy, he won't write the check. And then when you look today, there's a story in Politico. Trump cracks open wallet. As soon as I saw the headline, I look at it and say, oh, how much is he cracking it for?
$13 million in March. Now, what's a national general going to cost him?
Exactly. It's going to cost him $1 billion at least, with a B. And the other thing about it is, look what he spent money on. Staff, this much. Hats and T-shirts that he's giving away, this much. I mean, he's not even spending on other things you need to spend it on. Now, that might change with Manafort, because Manafort is bringing in some other pros. But, is it too late? It could be.
Are we done with the dirty tricks?
Yeah, I think we're pretty much done with that.
When you say he brings in these pros, I immediately think,
Let me give you an example of what he's done. You remember the movie Mississippi Burning?
Sure.
Okay. Willem Dafoe and Gene Hackman. And Gene Hackman's a good old country sheriff who becomes an FBI agent, right? And he knows how these good old boys in the South work, because he's one of them. And Willem Dafoe's gonna, he's gonna walk up to these, poor black people in Mississippi and ask them questions in full view of everybody else. Well, of course they're gonna answer your question. What are you, nuts? And remember, it gets to a point where Willem Dafoe is so frustrated, and he says, "Okay, bring in your people," right? Remember?
Right.
And it's the last 10 minutes of the movie when he brings in his guys, and
All of a sudden he gets the answers
all of a
at
sudden
once.
he goes, to one guy he says, he walks in with this guy into the shoe shop, and he's, "Can I have change for a 20?" And the guy reaches in the drawer and he slams the door in his hand and he says, "Now come with me," right? And in 10 minutes, they wipe out the Ku Klux Klan. Right? Well, this is the kind of pros he brought in. He's brought in the kind of guys that they don't shake your hand, they don't go to fundraisers. They sit at the back of the room with their arms like this. Those are the guys you want. The quiet killers.
Speaking of change of a 20, it's now a Tubman. This is a collector's item. This is a $20 bill, U.S. currency, with the photo of Andrew Jackson on it. They're not going to be making them anymore.
Yeah.
Harriet Tubman is the late Harriet Tubman, and as you pointed out, it's kind of interesting that they would put a Republican as the first woman.
Yeah, probably who owned a gun. I mean,
railroad.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably said, okay, she checks out on all these. Yeah, okay. Was she gay? No, we don't got that. Oh, but she was a Republican. I'm surprised there wasn't screaming in the Treasury Department, but hey.
So will be the new face of the $20 bill. Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory, will be relegated to the back. And there's more than just a subtle message there, because the political correctness of all of this, Jackson fought the Native Americans, killed a lot of them. And of course, she was an abolitionist, anti-slavery, Underground Railroad. And I checked, she was married. She married a free slave named John Tubman, which today proves that Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
There'll be more changes to the currency as we go along, which brings us to this. Whether you are an Obama supporter or not, it's going to be an interesting few months, because it looks like he is going to be making a lot of decisions by fiat, such as this one. Mm-hmm. The first woman on a bill, the first woman of color on a bill.
I think this is part of Barack Obama's final thumbing his nose at the old order. Let's put it that way. He's been very successful. You got to give him credit. Republicans keep saying, "Look at these dumb things he's doing." And when Marco Rubio in a debate said he knows exactly what he's doing, although Marco tended to repeat that line and got him in trouble, he was absolutely correct. I mean, this guy has done things according to a plan, and he's finally given the lefties what they wanted. They've exalted political correctness to a height. He got gay marriage. I mean, if you're on the left, he might not have done anything about jobs or anything else. He's done their checklist of the social justice stuff, and he's still at it. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, for them, he's been successful. For the country as a whole, he's been very divisive. And when he speaks out on things like race, he speaks on it from one side. He never speaks at it from the other side. And I always say to myself, wait a second. Yes, his father was black. His mother was white.
There you go.
I mean, he could have easily come in and say, "Look, I'm a symbol of this new America, and I understand where you're coming from, but here's where we're going." Instead, it's like, what you did in the past is wrong, and you're going to pay a penalty for it, and we're going to stick it in your ear.
Well, if Donald Trump does go on to get the nomination, and who knows what's going to happen in the fall. The polls say that Donald Trump will get his clock cleaned by Hillary Clinton, but the tea leaves suggest Hillary may or may not be there in the fall. Well, she'll be with us on Earth, but she may not be a viable candidate if the FBI has what many people believe they do have, the goods on her. If Donald Trump somehow gets into the White House, not Bill Clinton, Barack Obama created that monster because he's just shrunk in the middle class. And exit poll after exit poll, Trump voters are saying they're so mad about that. They feel that their chance has been lost. Their retirement is gone. The jobs they wanted, the things they trained for, gone.
Right. And, the American people are a forward-looking people. Even when we get knocked down, we're always looking to be getting up and where we're heading. Reagan was that way.
Morning again in America.
Morning in America. And opportunity. And all those kind of things. But this recession has been so brutal, and so many people just never got back up.
Well, you say this recession like it never ended.
It hasn't. In
I agree
essence,
with
it's just kind of this long-running, agonizing 2% growth here, 1% and 0, bouncing back and forth, and we're left with metrics. Well, so many people have got jobs. Yeah, but this many people dropped out of the workforce. Well, the unemployment rate is down. The unemployment rate is phony. So there's a disconnect between all this stuff. And if we had bounced back after '08, and if President Obama, think about this, if he had told the Democrats, we ain't doing health care right now, we'll get to that, right? First thing we're doing is get the people back on their feet.
You're not thinking of your legacy.
Oh, yes. Well, that's true. That's true. You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking of my legacy. That's all these guys do. Listen, when I hear a president saying, or hear the news go, President Obama will be working on his legacy, he don't get to write his legacy. History writes his legacy. And he'll be dead when it's really written, or he'll be an older man. But, look, Obama's doing what he's doing. He's enjoying this part because he's free. No elections, no nothing, and I think he just enjoys.
Well, you wonder what is in his heart in terms of this election, because there is bad blood between the Obama family and the Clinton family. It's been written about, it's been publicized, it's true. Some might argue that he dispatched her to be Secretary of State so she'd be out of his hair 200 days a year. And then there's Bill. And there's a natural, I guess, competition between a former president and a sitting president. Does he want Hillary Clinton to succeed, or whoever it is, and have his 8-year legacy carried forward? Or does he want her to fall on her face, say, see, I could do it, but you couldn't?
Well, he figures he doesn't want a Republican in there because he figures that'll overturn his stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
With her, I think he just wants her to preserve whatever he's done. And the way Bernie Sanders has driven the party even farther to the left, that's possible. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton doesn't want to be, cleaning up after Barack Obama. And that's what she will be doing. Because let's look at it. Presidents in the Middle East, the Saudis don't like him. They don't even send a member of the royal family to greet him at the airport. They send some functionary.
Yeah.
And that was significant. That's their message to him.
Same thing happened in Cuba.
Same thing happened in Cuba. But, with her, she doesn't want to clean up after the elephants or the donkeys. She wants to have her own legacy. Well, what's that mean? She's going to have to either go against some of the stuff he's done or build upon what he's done in an even greater way. But
let's talk about her legacy right for the moment.
Hers?
Hers. Whitewater, trying to take America into national socialized health care, lies about all sorts of things.
Libya,
failing to do anything about her husband's misdeeds in the Oval Office, keeping quiet about it, and yet calling herself a feminist.
Not keeping the Randy hound dog on the porch.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then there's the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah.
Which is a work in progress in many ways.
Yep.
From an investigatory viewpoint as well.
Yep, and we talked about that today.
We did, and we should talk about it a little bit here too. Well, I'm going to let you tell the story. You know it a little bit better.
Well, this morning, we've talked about this a lot, this whole email scandal. And you hear the media go, well, it's email, it really isn't a big deal, and she'll probably get off and everything else. But Ron Fournier from the Associated Press has always said, forget the emails, follow the money, follow the foundation. And Monica Crowley this morning was on Fox, and she's a very, very smart person. She says that the reason there's 147 agents on this is not checking emails. They're looking at the connection between her actions at State Department and the Clinton Foundation. Was she doing things that resulted in public corruption charges, potentially? I think that's the smoking gun. This is what's going to shock everybody, is because everybody's looking at the emails. All the reporters, because they're too lazy or they're really not trying to think about this thing or they don't have the right sources. I agree with Crowley. I think this is going to the Clinton Foundation. That's why it's taking so long. That's why this guy Pagliano, all he did was he rolled over to tell whatever he could as far as the server goes. So they got that part.
Well, think about this. Why would she have a server in her home when, as Secretary of State, she's traveling 200 days a week, and you add in holidays and weekends, that's pretty good part of a year.
Yeah.
And given what we know about the Obama foreign policy, carrying it out really doesn't take 200 days a year of travel to foreign countries, does it?
No. And
so
I think,
why would she be doing it?
Well, you know, two, she wants all the pictures, so when she runs for president, she can say, this is me shaking the hands of Sheik wanna, and this is me shaking the hands of President Basoto from Lesotho. Right. You know, she wants all that stuff. And the other thing is, too, I think she wanted to be away from the American political scene. Little bit of distance. I'm just the Secretary of State. I don't know what they're doing over there in that Obamacare stuff.
She actually got some very favorable press of the most traveled Secretary of State and 200 days a year and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, she goes, hi, I'm Hillary Clinton, and this is my frequent flyer card. Look how many miles I have on it. But, I mean, she, you know, I think that we're all going to be shocked within the next few months about what happens on this whole email and this other FBI thing. I think people's jaws are going to drop.
If you had a crystal ball and you put a little Windex on it and looked into it, what do you see Americans waking up to early November?
If it's Trump and Hillary?
I mean, whoever it is, how do you think it'll shake out?
Right now, if you had to ask me right now, I'd say it favors Hillary, but not by much.
And that's with the asterisk that she's not indicted.
That's right. Because Trump's got a lot of repair to do. And until he begins the repair process, and the repair process includes first the RNC, shut up. He needs to shut up. He needs to say, hey, you know, those are the rules. I was upset, but, you know, hey, it is what it is. Then he's got to repair his thing with women. He's got to do something other than saying, I like women.
I married three of them.
Yeah. You know, you guys ought to love me. I married three of them, and they're all still very wealthy women. But he's got to make some changes. And he's got to start giving something a little more substantive than I'm going to build a wall, and if they complain, it's going to be higher, and all this other. That's nice hyperbole. That's great campaign stuff when you're in a primary. But he's got to start acting like a president. And people have to be able to see him as a president. You know, it's a funny thing. When most people, when they get to the voting part, before they put the X down, they think to themselves, I'm going to look at this person for the next 4 years as coming in my living room. And even more than that, wherever I turn, the president is ubiquitous nowadays. You know, it used to be the president hung out in the White House or went to a speech here or a speech there. Today, the president, Mr. President, how do you feel about the NCAA tournament? Oh, here's my bracket. You know, he's everywhere. And the thing is, am I going to be comfortable with this person for 4 years?
And can anybody contain Donald Trump? It's one thing to say, he's got a few months between the convention and November to polish it. This has been Donald Trump forever. You're not going to change him. He is what he is. But that brings this thought I had today, and maybe it's kind of a silly thought, but we are in such a media age. We look at Chris Christie.
Yeah.
He's a fat guy. If he doesn't have any discipline, we want him as our president. That's not my opinion. This is people talking, right? Well, imagine Calvin Coolidge, Harry Truman. These guys, they weren't telegenic.
No.
Woodrow Wilson?
No. They were from. Look at the presidents. Eisenhower was the first president to address the American people on TV. And it was a rough meeting for him. He had a little bit of a high voice.
A little bit of
American people.
dome.
Yeah, he wasn't very telegenic.
But he won a war.
Won a war. Yeah, won a war.
Helps.
Had a great smile and all this other stuff. But look at from Jack Kennedy on. Look at how Jack Kennedy wins. Johnson was a vice president. They never expected to be president. And
Jack Kennedy was the gold standard of, I think, for that generation. And there are a lot of people I know watching us who only know him through pictures. Only know him, unfortunately, because he was assassinated. But he was a very handsome guy. He had a lot of pizzazz. He had a great wit.
Yeah.
And I think, with the exception of the people who may have conspired to kill him, he was fairly popular, and the press gave him a great berth because they admired him.
Yeah.
I mean, he brought vigor. You know, I mean, you're coming from Eisenhower, who's like an old general, to Kennedy, and there's vigor, and then there's Jackie in the White House, and there's glamour and Camelot, etc.
But Eisenhower, the general, begat Kennedy, the ensign. So while Eisenhower was making the big decisions, men like Jack Kennedy were out in the field fighting the war. So that was a nice transition. It's also, if you look on the television side, you know who was a little-known producer at the first or second Nixon debate was a young man named Roger Ailes.
Oh, and okay.
Hewitt was there too.
Yeah.
Ailes was below Hewitt.
All right.
And later on, Ailes' paths crossed with Nixon when Nixon was considering running for president again. And so the story goes something to the effect of Ailes pointed to the television camera and goes, then you better learn this. You better learn this. Because if you don't know this, you can forget it. 68, what does Nixon do? Goes on laughing.
That's true.
Everybody thinks about Bill Clinton when he went on with his saxophone. Nixon did it first. Nixon hugged Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah,
All
true.
things completely out of character for a Richard Nixon. And he was a little awkward at it. Much like Hillary Clinton's awkward at some of the pop culture stuff.
And here's a little bit of
yeah.
irony, too, when you think about how kind of nasty and hostile this run-up to the general election has been. Jack Kennedy and Dick Nixon were very good friends.
Yes, very close friends.
Barry Goldwater, who never got a chance to run against Jack Kennedy because he was assassinated the year before, were very good friends.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
there you go.
When Jack went into the hospital with his back acted up or something, I remember reading that the first letter that Jackie Kennedy got, or maybe it was after the assassination, maybe it was from Richard Nixon. A lengthy handwritten letter. And she cherished that letter. And you know, when you look behind the scenes about, oh, Nixon was this, Nixon was that, yeah, we all have, you know, he's Richard III. Just go read Shakespeare and Nixon's there.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were the little things, you know, that people remember in politics, and nobody does that stuff anymore.
And conversely, you know, comparing that era to this one, while Nixon and Kennedy were rivals, they were very good friends. Barry Goldwater, polar opposite politically. Well, not quite polar opposite. Jack Kennedy was pretty conservative for a Democrat. But Jack Kennedy hated Lyndon Johnson and vice versa, but he puts him on the ticket because he needed that geographic balance.
That's exactly right. And remember the one thing about Nixon, too, in 1960. This is where Nixon really saved the country. And it's a little-known thing, that Chicago, you know, the old story of Chicago voting, and Daley was corrupt, and they put all these dead people on the ballot, or, you know, they voted for all these dead people. Nixon's the night, remember, Kennedy didn't go before the cameras till the following morning to say, I've just talked to, you know, Vice President Nixon and blah, blah, blah. What happened is the Republicans came to Dick from Illinois. We got it. We can prove these guys are a bunch of crooks. We can throw this election into, you know, chaos. Nixon said, absolutely not.
Bad for the country.
We are not going to do that to the United States of America. He won. We're not going to go there because that would have really thrown the nation into turmoil. And again, a little known gesture that really helped the country and helped the country move on to the next level.
And I don't know that anybody's ever proved that that's what happened in Cook County with Dick Daley in the chair.
Yeah.
It very well might have been. Of course, there's whether it's apocryphal or not, the supposed telegram from Joseph Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's father, saying, I don't mind buying a victory. I'll be damned if I'll pay for a landslide.
Pay for a landslide, right.
Well, let's give you one more scenario.
Yeah.
If it is Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton, how does that shake out?
Hillary Clinton. Because Ted Cruz has a different problem than Trump. Trump's problem is that he doesn't have a modulator in his voice. You know, he's got to learn how to drop it lower. Right. He's got to learn how to give a speech. And, you know, now when he goes in these states and he pulls out a piece of paper and it says, hey, it's great being here in Pennsylvania. How's Joe Paterno?
Yeah.
Okay, he's got to learn. He doesn't have
I remember being on the pile at
Right.
7-Eleven.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So he's got to learn that. With Cruz is a little too
Let me tell you,
slick.
On January 1st, I'm going to sign an executive order. Yeah, everything's this way.
And it's always, and if you know what might happen if Donald Trump becomes president. On the other hand, I mean, it just sounds phony. You know, I'd like to hear the guy talk, you know, in the car.
You know, I like a lot of what Ted Cruz's platform is about. I don't know that I like Ted Cruz, but at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, this isn't a popularity count.
Yeah.
Well, it is, but it's not. Personally, do I like you or not like you? Are you good for the country? Ted Cruz over the incumbent in a heartbeat. Ted Cruz over Hillary in a heartbeat. My personal views, maybe your personal views. But there are a lot of people who can't get past that. And I always wonder, you hear these very unpopular in Washington. Why is that? Do they think he's a phony? Do they think he's out for himself? Do they think he's a backstabber? What is it?
Well, he joined the club, and then he proceeded to soil the carpet.
These rules aren't for me.
Yeah, you don't join the United States Senate and then walk in the door and call your leader a liar, and you don't stand up there and do filibusters without, having a strategy and checking with the leadership. Sometimes they might say, go ahead, buy some time for us, and you're good at that. But he didn't. He's a lone wolf. And it makes you wonder, how would he handle, if he was president, how's he going to deal with the Congress? And think about this, how's he going to, what if it ever turns over to a Democratic Senate again? Then he's got a whole different set of problems. But the thing about Ted Cruz is there's just a feeling with people, and they just can't get past his, there's a phoniness to it. There's not an authenticity.
Well, he has very much denied that allegation that he had some sort of extramarital relationship with 4 or 5 women. And it's not so much that his wife was going to be upset. They could have been delegates.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus the fact is that all these women are out there going, really? You went with Ted Cruz?
Wow. All right. I guess final question.
Yeah.
It's this wild card here. If Hillary doesn't make it, now she's going to make it in terms of numbers, but if there is an indictment or she feels she needs to step down because of imminent proceedings, does that make it better for a Cruz or a Trump? And who would be running? Would it be Bernie?
Well, as we talked about earlier, it depends on when it happens. If it happens before the convention, and how it happens. Let's say they just send a stern letter to the Justice Department. She did all these things, and they're not quite criminal, but they're bad, okay? She can survive that, although that might hurt her in the general.
A high crime and a misdemeanor before even in office.
Yeah. Now, let's say it's FBI, by God, they send over a criminal referral. We want this person indicted. That's what they do. And then the Obama administration says no. She's still in trouble because nobody trusts the Obama administration. The voters trust the FBI. They're one of the last institutions beside the military that people still trust. So they would say, hey, if the FBI says it, so then she's in trouble. Now she might, have a problem. If it happens before the convention, you could see Bernie's going to say, well, then it's mine.
He's got 1,000.
And just like in the Republican side, what's the establishment going to say in the DNC? Oh my gosh, we can't run with Bernie. He'll get slaughtered. So what do they say? They say, okay, well, we'll put Joe in there. Well, then they make Bernie's supporters unhappy. So that's pretty complicated. If, on the other hand, she gets nominated and then they drop the hammer on her, all of a sudden she might have to step down. Then
well, how about the second half of her ticket? Could that person step up?
Could. Because what will happen is, remember when McGovern ran in '72, he picked Thomas Eagleton,
who had the mental.
And Eagleton had been electroshock therapy.
Right.
So, and that was like 24 hours after the nomination. Yep. So what happened? That means the Democratic National Committee, all those delegates of the committee, they make the decision. Somebody puts up a nomination, they put up Sergeant Shriver.
Right.
So, but the committee would do it. Same on the Republican side. So in this case, if it was after the convention, after she's received the nomination, they'd have a meeting. They'd fly everybody in, or do it by phone, have a meeting, what are we gonna do, blah, blah, blah. Right. And that would allow them at least to put somebody in there besides Bernie, because they say, well, the convention's over, but their biggest problem is, are they gonna get these millennials energized? The millennials are energized for Bernie right now. Just like Trump supporters are energized for Trump.
But they're not millennials.
Right.
He's batting zero with the under 37.
He's totally batting zero with them. And so is Hillary for that matter. So, but they don't really vote that much anyways. Their voting patterns have not been established, mainly because they're not paying taxes yet. But what will happen is they got to figure a way to keep those people in the corral. And if they can't, they're going to have the biggest problems. And these are these are such the unknowns out there, because Bernie's stirred up all these people, Trump stirred up all these people, but a lot of them are new to the process. So it's very hard for a campaign to go in and ID an Ed Crane. They can ID you right away. He lives in El Dorado Hills. We know this about him. Oh, by the way, he's getting these magazines, this and that. They know so much about you that they can target you with messages. But if you're new voters, or how do they target you? How do they target a millennial who's moving around? They target him on his phone or her phone. How do they get after that guy who's out of work and everything else, the Trump supporters? So all the models for this year are all broken.
Yeah, it's interesting. I said that final question, but of course it's a two-parter. Is there any wiggle room for the Obama administration with respect to Hillary? I mean, when the FBI director comes calling on the Attorney General and says, look, I've got X, Y, and Z, your call, could she say, take Z off the table, take X off the table, and we'll push hard for Y?
Maybe. There might be.
And could Obama
No.
be thinking pardon? Could Obama be calling Comey up constantly saying, what do you have? When am I going to see it?
If the word pardon is mentioned, you're damn near admitting that you committed a crime, whether you have or not.
And you're sabotaging her election anyway.
Yeah.
They don't pardon you for things you didn't do.
Look, if this thing, yeah. I think if this thing gets to the point where it's related to the foundation and public corruption, he's got to let her fall. He can't do, if he grabs her then, you meaning while she was running the State Department, either you were dumb or nobody was paying attention to what she was doing with these crooks over at that Clinton Foundation.
Well, he's between a rock and a hard place
He
because
is.
number one, he doesn't want to throw a Democrat under the bus if he doesn't have to. Number two, he's got a legacy to protect. And number three, if she was doing something under his watch, it was under his watch.
That's right. But number one is that he cares about his legacy. Clintons are down the list.
Way down.
Way down. And so one is his legacy. If he thinks that letting her off the hook, remember what happened to Jerry Ford? He pardoned Richard Nixon.
Cost him an election.
Yeah. He did the right thing, but it cost him an election. So I think Obama, everybody thinks, well, he's going to do this and they're going to shape this. I think that if it's about public corruption more than the email scandal, he's got to let her fall.
Well, we shall see. And when these things do happen, we will bring them to you right here on thelibertyplaybook.com. Brand new website. Glad you came upon it. Tell your friends and your family. Lots of things here. Peruse the website. You're going to see our little general store. We've got some items there. We've got our commentary, Crane's Corner, the Cowboy Wisdom, and all sorts of things about the U.S. Constitution. So thanks for joining us. He's the Cowboy. I'm Crane. Catch you next time.
See you later.